It was the kind of call officers hear every night. A disturbance, a complaint about noise, a neighbor reporting something off. Nothing that suggested the gates of hell were about to open. On May 6, 2013, Cleveland police were dispatched to a modest home on Seymour Avenue, a narrow residential street where kids rode bikes, neighbors waved hello, and porches sagged under the weight of ordinary lives. But this call wasn't about loud music. It was about screaming. And when police arrived, what they found inside that house would shock the world and force a city to confront the terrifying truth that pure evil can hide behind the most ordinary doors. Seymour Avenue didn't look dangerous. Single-story homes, chain-link fences, small yards where weeds fought the concrete. Neighbors had lived beside one another for years. They knew who belonged, they knew who didn't, and they knew Ariel Castro. He was a bus driver, a musician, a father, a man who waved back. Nothing about him screamed monster. That was the problem. Late that afternoon, a neighbor named Charles Ramsey heard something that didn't fit. A woman screaming, not arguing, not laughing, not yelling at a TV, screaming in fear. He followed the sound to the house next door, the home owned by Ariel Castro. At first, he hesitated. You don't accuse neighbors lightly, but the screams continued, so he did the unthinkable. He knocked. Ariel Castro answered calmly. He claimed there was nothing wrong, but then something happened that shattered the illusion. A woman appeared at the door, panicked, desperate, trying to force her way out. Castro slammed the door shut, and Ramsey knew in that moment that this was no noise complaint. Ramsey called 911. His voice shook as he explained that a woman was trapped inside a neighbor's house and begging for help. Police arrived within minutes. What they found defied comprehension. Officers forced their way inside. The first woman they encountered was Amanda Berry, thin, shaken, clutching a child born in captivity. She told them she had been kidnapped 10 years earlier. 10 years. And then came the words that froze everyone in place. There are more women inside. Inside the home, officers found Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus. Both had vanished years earlier. Both had been presumed dead by many. Both had been imprisoned inside this house, chained, beaten, starved, raped, and psychologically tortured for over a decade. The walls bore witness, chains bolted to the floor, locked rooms, barriers designed to control movement and hope. This wasn't a crime scene, this was a prison. Ariel Castro was arrested on the spot. Neighbors watched in disbelief as the man they waved to was led away in handcuffs. Parents clutched their children tighter. The questions began immediately. How could this happen? How did no one know? How did evil live here for so long, undetected? Years earlier, Cleveland had searched desperately for 3 missing girls. Michelle Knight, taken in 2002 while walking home. Amanda Berry, abducted in 2003 on the eve of her 17th birthday. Gina DeJesus, kidnapped in 2004 after school. Posters had faded, leads had gone cold, and yet all this time they were alive, hidden. As detectives walked through the house, a haunting truth emerged. There had been signs. Neighbors had heard noises, strange activity, women glimpsed in windows. But each time, the explanations seemed plausible, until they weren't. This wasn't a failure of awareness, it was a failure of imagination, because it forces us to confront something deeply unsettling. You can live next door to evil and never recognize it. It doesn't snarl, it doesn't lurk in alleyways. Sometimes it mows its lawn and smiles. When the front door on Seymour Avenue finally opened to police, the rescue happened fast. What followed did not. Because liberation is a moment, but survival is a decade. And the years inside that house were built to erase time, identity, and hope. The women would later explain that Ariel Castro didn't rely on chaos to control them. He relied on routine. Doors were locked at specific hours. Lights were turned off on command. Food was rationed and inconsistent, sometimes withheld as punishment. He used rules to make the captivity feel permanent, predictable, endless. Breaking a rule meant consequences, and the consequences were severe. Police would eventually remove heavy chains bolted to the floor, chains that tethered ankles and wrists for hours, sometimes days. But the physical restraints were only half the story. Castro used isolation as a weapon. He forced the women apart. He limited speech. He punished any sign of bonding. Because connection meant strength, and strength threatened his control. Of the three, Michelle Knight endured the longest captivity. She had no child waiting outside, no milestone remembered publicly, no one searching as desperately. Castro seemed to sense this. He singled her out. She was beaten more often, deprived more severely, punished when others were spared. Michelle would later say the abuse wasn't random, it was intentional. Castro believed if he could destroy one of them completely, the others would obey without resistance. When Amanda Berry disappeared in 2003, she was 16 years old. She missed her graduation, her first apartment, her adulthood. Inside the house, time was measured differently, not in years, but in endurance. And then something happened that complicated everything. Amanda became pregnant. In 2006, Amanda gave birth to a daughter. Castro allowed the child to live, but only because the child increased his control. Motherhood became leverage, compliance became protection. The little girl, later known publicly as Jocelyn, grew up never knowing the outside world. Her childhood took place behind locked doors. Her first steps echoed on linoleum floors. Her world was a prison that pretended to be a home. Gina DeJesus was taken in 2004. She was 14, young enough to believe rescue was coming, and she never let go of that belief. Gina marked time mentally. She imagined her family. She held on to hope as an act of defiance, even when it hurt, even when it felt foolish. Hope in that house was rebellion. Over the years, neighbors reported strange sounds, cries, thumps, women's voices, but explanations came easily. Music was loud, the TV was blaring, family arguments happened. Evil thrives in plausibility, and Castro understood that. Experts later explained that Castro's power didn't come from constant violence, it came from unpredictability. Some days he brought fast food, some days he brought punishment. He alternated cruelty with small kindnesses, confusing loyalty with survival. This is how captors distort reality. This is how people survive the unbearable. On one birthday, Castro celebrated, then snapped. He chained Michelle to a beam. He tightened the restraint. He left her there. She lost consciousness. She nearly died. Later, Castro claimed he had saved her life, as if mercy erased intent. Despite everything, the women found ways to help one another. They whispered encouragement. They shared food. They watched over Amanda's daughter together. Against Castro's rules, they formed a family, not by blood, but by necessity. Even when Castro was gone, at work, running errands, the fear remained, because escape attempts had failed before, because punishment was worse than captivity, because the outside world felt distant and unreal. Until one afternoon, everything changed. On May 6, 2013, Castro left the house. He locked the inner doors, but he made a mistake, a small one. A door wasn't secured properly. Amanda noticed, and for the first time in 10 years, opportunity outweighed fear. Freedom didn't arrive with sirens. It arrived with a mistake. On the afternoon of May 6, 2013, the house on Seymour Avenue breathed differently. Ariel Castro had left, routine errands, nothing unusual, and locked the inner doors the way he always did. But one lock didn't seat fully, one hinge didn't catch, one barrier failed. Inside, Amanda Berry felt it before she could explain it. A looseness, a difference in the door's resistance. 10 years of terror had trained her senses to read the house like weather. This time, the air shifted. She tried the door. It moved. Not far, not enough, but enough to know the impossible might be possible. Escape attempts had failed before. Punishment had been brutal. Hope had been dangerous. Amanda thought of her daughter, 10 years old, born into captivity, her world a maze of locks and rules. She thought of Michelle Knight, who had endured the worst of the beatings. She thought of Gina DeJesus, whose belief in rescue had kept a fragile flame alive. Fear told her to wait. Instinct told her to move. She pulled. The door gave way just enough for her to squeeze an arm through the gap, reaching blindly for help that might not exist. Then she screamed. Next door, Charles Ramsey was finishing lunch when the sound cut through his kitchen. Not arguing, not television, a scream with nowhere to land. He followed it to the house he thought he knew. He knocked. Ariel Castro answered, calm as ever, insisting nothing was wrong. Ramsey hesitated, because that's what people do when evil wears normal clothes. Then the door moved again. A woman's arm appeared. Panic spilled into daylight. Ramsey didn't argue. He kicked the door. It cracked. And in that crack, the lie collapsed. Ramsey dialed 911. His voice, unpolished, urgent, told the dispatcher what mattered. A woman was trapped and begging for help. Police were already nearby for an unrelated call. They arrived in minutes. Minutes that felt like a lifetime inside that house. Officers forced entry. Amanda Berry ran toward them with her child in her arms. She spoke fast, words tumbling over one another, trying to compress 10 years into seconds. There are more women inside. The sentence landed like a detonation. Police moved through the house carefully, expecting resistance. What they found instead was evidence. Chains bolted to floors, locked rooms with reinforced doors, windows blocked from view. And then they found Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus, alive, thin, shaken, unmistakably real. The missing posters the city had memorized were suddenly wrong. Ariel Castro returned to the house while police were still there. He was taken into custody without a chase, without a spectacle. Neighbors gathered, phones lifted. A man who had waved hello for years was led away in handcuffs. The contrast was unbearable. Evil, exposed, looked small. News spread faster than disbelief. 3 women missing for years, found alive. A child born in captivity. A neighbor, ordinary, unassuming, credited with hearing what others had explained away. The street filled with cameras. The city held its breath, and the women were taken to safety. Freedom didn't feel triumphant. It felt confusing. Hospitals were bright. Sounds were sharp. Space felt unsafe without walls. Michelle Knight later said that freedom came with guilt. Guilt for surviving, for not escaping sooner, for living when others had stopped searching. Gina DeJesus clung to her family, stunned that the future had restarted. Amanda Berry focused on one thing, keeping her daughter close enough to touch. How did this go on for so long? How many chances were missed? Who heard something and chose comfort over confrontation? Police reviewed past calls to the house. There had been welfare checks, noise complaints, moments when suspicion brushed against routine and slid away. The truth was ugly. Evil thrives when it feels believable. Cleveland wrestled with shock and shame, not because people hadn't cared, but because caring hadn't translated into action. Neighbors replayed memories, sounds, sights, small things that now felt enormous. The house was condemned, but the questions lingered. The house on Seymour Avenue had already told its story. Now, the world was about to hear it spoken aloud, under oath, in open court by the women who survived it. For Ariel Castro, the years of control were over. For Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus, justice would be something far more complicated than a verdict. When Ariel Castro was brought into court, the room filled with reporters, families, and strangers who felt personally shaken by what had been uncovered. He wore an orange jumpsuit. His posture was small. His face looked older than his years, but nothing about him suggested the scale of what he had done. And that contrast between appearance and reality hung over the trial like a warning. The most powerful moments of the case did not come from forensic diagrams or crime scene photos. They came from voices. Michelle spoke first. She described being chained for days, starved, beaten, dehumanized. She spoke of being treated as disposable, punished more harshly because she had no one outside searching hard enough. Her testimony wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was relentless, and it forced the courtroom to confront a truth no sentence could undo. Some wounds do not close when the door finally opens. Amanda spoke of captivity as a mother, of raising a child in silence, of teaching her daughter what little she could using scraps of the outside world, of protecting innocence inside a place built to destroy it. She described the moment she decided to scream, not because she believed she would survive, but because her daughter deserved a chance. Gina spoke of hope, of holding on to belief when evidence argued otherwise, of counting time mentally, of promising herself she would see her family again. Her survival wasn't loud, it was stubborn. Castro's attorneys initially prepared for trial, but the evidence was overwhelming. DNA, witness testimony, physical restraints, medical records. There was no alternate explanation. There was no misunderstanding. There was no ambiguity. In July 2013, Ariel Castro pleaded guilty to 937 counts, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder. He spoke briefly. He attempted to frame himself as a product of addiction. He claimed the women consented at times. He blamed impulses. The judge stopped him. The courtroom did not need rationalizations. It needed accountability. Ariel Castro was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 1,000 years. The judge's words were direct. You took advantage of your victims' vulnerability. You stole their childhoods, their families, their freedom. You will never leave prison. Castro was led away for the last time. In 2015, the house on Seymour Avenue was demolished. The walls that hid screams were reduced to dust. Neighbors watched quietly. Some cried, some stared. The empty lot became a symbol, not of erasure, but of acknowledgement. Evil had lived there, and it would not be preserved. Castro died in prison in 2016 by suicide. The news landed softly. There was no celebration, no relief, because justice for the women was never about him. It was about reclaiming what remained. Michelle Knight changed her name and became an advocate for victims. Amanda Berry works with missing persons organizations, helping families cling to hope. Gina De Jesus lives privately, healing away from the public eye. They are not defined by what was done to them. They are defined by what they endured. Because it wasn't uncovered by brilliance, it was uncovered by listening. A scream, a neighbor, a decision not to look away. And that means the responsibility belongs to all of us. How many warning signs are dismissed as none of our business? Would this case have ended sooner if one neighbor had acted earlier? Should police treat repeated noise or welfare calls differently? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. If this story shook you, educated you, or made you reflect, like this video, subscribe to Unimaginable True Crimes. Turn on notifications to continue these investigations. Every story told keeps another truth from staying buried. Before you leave, this case isn't the only one where the truth was hidden in plain sight. In our next episode, police respond to a call that seems routine until one detail exposes a crime far darker than anyone imagined. If you want to see how a single overlooked clue unraveled everything, watch the next video on your screen now.